What is wisdom? Take a moment and even hit pause now to have a think about that, if you would like to. What is wisdom? In British culture, we have some proverbs, don't we? A stitch in time saves 9. Discretion is the better part of valour. Honesty is the best policy. Time and tide wait for no man. All of these statements are true. And I suppose they do bring wisdom to our lives. After all, if you're on the beach at Weston-super-Mare and the tide turns, it won't wait for you to run that mile back to the tide line on the beach before it starts lapping at your ankles. Just ask the RNLI down there, or any of the car drivers that have parked below the waterline and returned to discover that their car, miraculously, a little like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, can suddenly float. And sand can get into the engine block. Anyway, but there's also something relational about wisdom. Honesty is the best policy. Well, that certainly helps to keep you grounded, lets you know if you have really upset someone, or empowers another person to know the truth so they can respond. But to what extent are these statements wisdom? Or to what extent are they just a proverb? What if we make these sayings more dynamic? Is it wise to touch an electric fence? Clearly no. Is it wise to save a little money for a rainy day for when things break? Well, clearly yes. The difference between the two sayings is that the latter creates a potential, creates a movement towards a positive outcome. It generates life, whereas the former almost certainly may lead to life coming to an end. Wisdom leads to life, wouldn't you agree? As we shall unpack as we continue, the depth and value of that life is discovered in relation to wisdom's ultimate source. Proverbs, the book. But Proverbs is a compilation of proverbs, or mashal as it's called in the Hebrew language. The term doesn't designate a specific literary form, and as such we find that there are a number of literary forms throughout the book. It's unclear about whether there was one author or whether there were a number, but scholars tend to favour the view that there were a handful of compilers for the book of Proverbs. And they brought together different chunks and segments at different times. And this is indicated by the overlap that occurs with some repeated proverbs throughout the book, as well as some of the linguistic nuances, etc. The structure of the book contains 9 subsections, and it includes the words of Solomon, words of the wise, words of Solomon as recorded by King Hezekiah of Judah, Agur, numerical proverbs, King Lemuel, and an acrostic poem about the capable wife. For full details, please see the notes that have been sent out, and if you would like a copy of the notes, please get in touch with the office. Interesting fact, did you know that the book of Proverbs is written as a book of poetry and not prose? Yes, that's right. In the Hebrew language, Proverbs is all poetry. Why so? Well, listen to these 2 phrases. I walked a mile to see the sea. Simple enough. I walked a mile to see the sea. But secondly, what about this one? After 1 mile, my sight fell upon the undulating mounds of cold, dark water in the English Channel. By now, you probably don't remember half of the second phrase I've just shared, which was prosaic. But you might remember, I walked a mile to see the sea. It has rhythm. It's memorable. It conveys an inner message that summons your lived experience to contribute to its fullest understanding. Happy memories of being by the sea? Well, this might be a joyful phrase for you. Unhappy memories of being by the sea? This may actually be slightly more painful and uncomfortable for you. Either way, it's memorable, and part of who we are connects with the phrase. Let me prove it to you. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. I think most people probably would have known that the next two words were "I'm yours," and most of you probably know that actually that's a Stevie Wonder song that we've heard many times at weddings. It's a good song for a wedding and to have. If you and all I did was sing 3 words, and you could fill in the rest. Now just imagine that I'd recited 5 minutes of Plato to you. I'm not sure that you would have remembered much of that, need I say any more. In an oral culture, the presence of a rhythmic hook made sayings memorable, short and sweet, rhythmic and repeatable. All of a sudden, wise sayings just trip off the tongue. So the teachers of wisdom were wise in whistling words to those in wonder. With poetry in hand, there are 2 main types of proverbial sentence in the book of Proverbs. The instruction, this gives a command, followed by the motivation for why you should fulfill that command. And the wisdom sentence, which includes a number of different types of what is called parallelism. Parallelism. Again, see the notes for a little more on that. Proverbs, then, is a compilation of wise sayings that were written poetically to assist the learner in memorizing the phrases. But again, we find the question, what makes them wise? Let's dig a little deeper. Proverbs connects practical and spiritual realities. In the book of Proverbs, we see the interconnection of the practical and spiritual truths. If they were just sayings, they would be like the instruction of Amenemope from Egypt. And whilst Proverbs does match some of those sayings quite closely, they are not drawn into the book of Proverbs on the basis of logical assent. Amenemope 7, verses 12 and 13 says, "Do not move the markers on the borders of the fields, nor shift the position of the measuring cord." Proverbs 22:28 says, "Do not remove the ancient landmark that your ancestors set up." Very close, very close. There is a practical wisdom in maintaining community through the maintaining of social legal boundaries, as it were, especially across a nation. But Amenemope's context was as the ruler of Egypt, maintaining a prosperous nation and establishing peace. Israel's context was as the people of promise, remembering that all that had gone before so that they could continue in their identity with justice and equity. Proverbs is covenant connected. So the context when applying wisdom matters. Yes, there's clearly some good thinking in Amenemope's proverb there. But it doesn't connect with the heart of the people of God, living out the values of God to fulfill God's desire for his people and for the nations. We're going to look now at 2 of the 3 central theological themes that Ernest Lucas identifies, and they help us to locate the context of wisdom as it is expressed in Proverbs. Firstly, the fear of Yahweh. As Proverbs 1:1-6 introduces the book through a prologue, the very first thing that is affirmed afterwards in verse 7 is, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge," wisdom. "Fools despise wisdom and understanding." This is echoed in Proverbs 9 and verse 10. In Proverbs 15 and verse 33, it changes ever so slightly to, "The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom." And later, near the start of Proverbs 31, it says, "Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." What these and other similarly worded verses in Proverbs show us is that the fear of Yahweh has both an inward aspect of one's relationship to Yahweh and an outward aspect of one's conduct in life. The wisdom of Proverbs arises when both the spiritual and the practical parts of our lives are brought together into unity before God. And this is not a unity birthed in anxiety-like fear. Instead, it wells up when we realise just how marvellous and magnificent God truly is. When we grow in a sense of holy awe and apply the word awesome properly. If we have awe for God, it implies that we also desire to draw closer to him. So again, fear, reverence, is actually an indicator of our proximity to God. No mighty smiter, just the awesome, creative, relational God who bends down to whisper wisdom to his people, to his beloved children. But secondly, there's wisdom and creation. In Proverbs 3:19 and 20, we see a link drawn between wisdom and creation. Then in Proverbs 8:22 to 36, quite a substantial section of continuity. This link is developed further. This time, the cosmos is shown as a place of order and structured design as established by Yahweh. So wisdom embodies the principles of order. In verse 31 of chapter 8, wisdom is also depicted as playing in the created order and particularly delighting in human beings. Lucas points out that here wisdom applies to take the role of mediator between creator, God, and creatures, us. Therefore, whoever finds wisdom finds life and obtains favour from the Lord. Against the backdrop of what has generally been pragmatic and moralistic readings of Proverbs, do you sense the excitement of what is at stake here? When you look closely at creation as one in awe of the Creator, it is possible to discover insight into divine wisdom. Okay, it can be easier said than done sometimes, but herein lies an invitation from God to seek to know him better through the revelation of wisdom. Who doesn't want that? Perhaps it comes as no surprise now that Paul in Romans 1 talks about God being revealed in creation, because creation can reveal God when the wisdom that binds it together is engaged. Wisdom shows creation has order, and people did not order it. So who did? The fear of the Lord and the wisdom of creation as themes point to an integrated life for each of us. An integrated life with the one who did the creating. Proverbs connects the practical to live today and the spiritual to live for God, and the decisions made that do not harness both are likely to be unwise in themselves. A quick comment before we move on. Proverbs does have a few confusing elements or contradictory sounding things. There are some proverbs that are contradictory or stand in tension with each other. There are other proverbs that identify that poverty can be the result of injustice or laziness, but that injustice can also lead to wealth. Indeed, Proverbs 15 verse 16 identifies how the righteous can be left at a disadvantage. Why is this so? Are the writers lazy, just plain stupid, or is it something else? Personally, I agree with the notion that the writers are picking up on the issues and the tensions that exist in life. What they say is plainly true, and in other regards, they allow us to see that human wisdom and understanding fall short of the ultimately unfathomable nature of divine wisdom. This is never to affirm wickedness, but instead to show that righteous living is always better, even if it is less prosperous in this life. The human mind may devise many plans, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will be established. Next, Proverbs transcend time. Another thing that we can see about wisdom as expressed through the Proverbs is that genuine wisdom, revealed through proximity to God and engaged with his good creation, transcends time. When we look at Jesus' teaching in the New Testament, we can pick up reflections of the Proverbs in some of the things that he says. The parable of the wise and the foolish builders in Matthew 7, verses 24 to 27. It reflects Proverbs 14 and verse 11, where the foolish builder can represent wickedness. Or what about Jesus speaking to Nicodemus, when in John 3 and 13 he answers the question posed by Agur in Proverbs 30 and verse 4. Or Matthew 11, chapter 19, when Jesus affirms that wisdom is proved right by her deeds, connecting himself to wisdom, and the one who rejects his message as standing in the place of the fool in Proverbs. Or what about applied by the New Testament authors? A number of the New Testament authors continue to demonstrate the reality of wisdom, even if it's not always as a quotation from Proverbs itself. In John 1, 1 to 14, John brings together the wisdom tradition of Judaism with the Greek Stoic thought of supreme word, and blends them both together in Jesus. Jesus was present at creation, as one being the word through which wisdom danced, over the order that was brought out of chaos. Or Peter, for example, expresses the wisdom of Proverbs 16 verse 7 in 1 Peter 3 and verse 13. Or Paul, who quotes from Proverbs 25:21 in Romans 12 verse 20. When we apply wisdom that is spiritually and practically formed, it is applicable to any era of time, and we discover that it has a transcendence that walks in step with the teachings and life of Jesus, who is himself presented as wisdom. Wisdom is not trapped in the past. Sure, we may have to work harder to discern and maintain the path of wisdom in the face of some technological and scientific developments today. But that is our call as the people of God. To walk as the people of God, learning to be in step with the wisdom of God that ushered forth creation through the eternal Son of God, Jesus. So what is wisdom as depicted in Proverbs? Wisdom is the faith-shaped connection between practical reality and spiritual identity that brings forth the life of God amongst those who will stand in awe of his majesty. How do we know wisdom more? If we want to be truly wise and live in the peace and prosperity that it brings, we start with prayer. As Solomon responded to God in 1 Kings 3 and verse 9, "So give your servant a discerning heart, to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" God said to Solomon, "You can have whatever you like." And Solomon said, "I would like a discerning heart. I would like wisdom." The place of prayer is a place that births the seed of wisdom in our lives. So we respond to God in humility and deference because wisdom, though made accessible through Jesus and the Bible, finds its ultimate source in God and not in us. We are not deities. Instead, we're just invited to lap up the wisdom that God gives to us, to allow the wisdom of Proverbs to fill our minds and our hearts, to apply it to our context, but remember that the wisdom of God can ultimately transcend our understanding. God's wisdom offers us so much. Proverbs is full of short statements, poetic phrases, memorable and lyrical expressions of what it means to live both practically and spiritually before God, together in unity. With that much on offer, with that much available to us, why would we pass by the thought of wisdom and seek to grab the electric fence? No. Let's grab the word of life. Let's allow wisdom to stir and build in us the joy and the clear thinking of the order of God as established in creation. Let's live in wisdom.